President Trump has made it clear that there is one red line for him, and that is the largest state sponsor of terror in the Middle East isn't allowed to get a nuclear weapon. Now, it's not so important that he's going to put boots on the ground, but the second largest sponsor of state terrorism, hey man, it's free game apparently. But is this actually part of a good strategy in the region, or is this just kind of desperate manipulation by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia? Check this out. So the U.S. has announced a deal with Saudi Arabia, authorizing them a nuclear program. Now, I want to be clear. I think Saudi Arabia actually already has nuclear reactors, but the difference with this deal is that it is much more sprawling. And it actually doesn't. I'm wrong. It has no operational nuclear reactors, but it is developing a civilian nuclear program. Now, this is significant because under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, countries are actually authorized and encouraged to have peaceful civilian nuclear uses. In fact, the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, was created with a carrot and stick structure. They have an audit capability to make sure that every piece of uranium that's either mined or shipped into a country gets tracked, and they know exactly how much is pulled out of the ground. They make sure that exact amount ends up in factories and refining. They track all of it to its final uses. And if there's ever an instance where even a few grams of refined uranium goes missing, it triggers huge consequences from the IAEA, or what passes for huge consequences by the IAEA, mostly just angry letters. Now, but that's the stick. The carrot is that the IAEA says, listen, we will help you, including with significant funds, develop and field nuclear power. This was created in the 1940s, where people actually believed that technology could make their lives better, not just turn it into giant data centers and AI-powered surveillance tech. But people said, whoa, nuclear power, this could use just a few pounds of uranium, could power an entire city for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. It is a game-changing technology that I think even the Europeans would agree they probably should have bought a few more nuclear power plants and bought a little less Russian gas over the past century. Whoops. But the point is that for countries like Saudi Arabia, they've never really gotten on the bandwagon, in part because, well, why would you buy your competition? You're an oil giant. If there's one thing Saudi Arabia doesn't really need, it's energy. They have literally their entire country is basically floating on a lake of petroleum. The Saudis, and even if they needed energy, the Saudi desert is a solar power like mecca. I mean, it also is the mecca of meccas, but it's really, I mean, and the Saudis have said, listen, we are really interested in solar power. A country with maybe some of the most solar potential of the entire world. Again, this has been more recent, this pivot towards solar power. But I think this is a real sign that the Saudis have plans to expand and diversify their energy, which makes it weird that they're like, actually, we also want a nuclear power plant. And the U.S. and Saudi Arabia are expected to announce a deal that will allow the Gulf Kingdom to develop a civilian nuclear program. Now, the announcement is likely going to come out on Wednesday, according to CBS News, which is owned by an administration ally, so I believe them. The agreement, which of course could be worth billions of dollars to the United States, conveniently, whose companies could be involved in building a facility to produce enriched uranium, useful as a fuel in power plants, but also to make bombs. So the U.S. has said, listen, Saudi Arabia, we're going to give you guys plants that can make enriched uranium. This sounds fine. So once again, we see this and we go, maybe this is fine. And I think, though, the troubling part is that, nuclear experts and former officials in Israel, the U.S.'s top ally in the Middle East, have voiced concern that the plan could lead Saudi Arabia to being able to develop a nuclear weapon. Well, that concern is actually completely valid because that's literally what enriched uranium does. That's the whole reason everyone's so mad at Iran. And the deal, though, allows U.S. companies to run nuclear power for the Saudis on Saudi soil. And the weird part is the Saudis already buy enriched uranium from third parties, which begs the question, why is it really important that you have enriched uranium on your own soil? Right? We ask these same questions about Iran, who transparently has a policy of not necessarily developing a nuclear weapon, but coming this close to being able to develop a nuke, right? And that's a policy of, again, a lot of countries actually that invest in this infrastructure, that sort of onshore it. They want to, in the event that their ally, the United States' nuclear umbrella vanishes, say a U.S. president announces that they're not protecting treaty allies like NATO, those countries want to be able to say, okay, we need to take care of ourselves. Let's just enrich the uranium that we already enriched for our nuclear reactors and just refine it a little more and stick it on an existing ballistic missile system that we have, and we have a crude bomb. Again, a lot of countries are 12 months. Most developed countries, I'd say, could probably get a nuclear weapon in 12 months if they have any enrichment capacity at all. Countries like Japan could probably do it in like 6. And so it should already be kind of it should already make tingle your spider senses a little bit to say, the Saudis it's really important that they be able to refine nuclear material on their soil. And again, the deal is thought to be worth tens of billions of dollars. I think Trump's kids are involved in, oh yeah, there we go. Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump, of course, invest and hold investment and advisory roles in companies tied to nuclear energy, including Quantum Leap Energy, a nuclear enrichment company. Yeah. Cool. So, of course, the Saudis this is interesting because in 2009, under Obama, the Saudis' neighbor, the United Arab Emirates, signed another nuclear deal with the United States, but the UAE cannot produce its own fuel and accepts a host of other restrictions. So obviously, non-nuclear proliferation campaigners are like, hey man, why is it so important that the Saudis be able to refine their own nuclear material, right? And again, in 2018, MBS said his nation was not planning to acquire a nuclear weapon, but without a doubt, if Iran developed a nuclear bomb, we would follow suit as soon as possible. Which, I gotta say, I really like his transparency, because, well, that would be the case of a lot of countries. That's one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why the Israeli government has never publicly acknowledged the existence of their nuclear weapon, because Iran would go from having having enriched uranium, ballistic missiles, and an empty warhead, right? You very close to just being like, boop, and you have a nuclear weapon, to actually going, boop, right? Having a breakout time measured in weeks, right? That's one of the reasons why Israel loves the Iran is weeks away from developing a nuclear weapon. That's true, but that's like saying I'm seconds away from killing my family because I technically have my clay shotgun and some rounds both in a safe. Like, yeah, I could. You're not wrong. That's not a thing I'm gonna do. So I think this is bad. And it's not just bad because if the Saudis get a nuclear weapon, like, here's the thing. The Saudis have this policy. Do you think Iran also has the reverse? That if Saudi Arabia gets a nuclear weapon, Iran will follow suit as soon as possible? Probably. And do you think it's also the Israeli policy that says that, listen, if the Saudis get a nuclear bomb, do you think the Israelis are going to go, hey, actually, FYI, we really do have a nuclear weapon. We really want to make this clear that the Saudis, we are in a state of mutually assured destruction. And then the Iranians will get a nuclear weapon. And you see how every time a country gets a nuclear weapon, the fear is that you add another moving part to the equation. And it's harder and harder to control keep the likelihood of nuclear weapons being used in war low. Because again, these things are they're city destroyers. if they're deployed in a military capacity, they exist essentially to annihilate entire cities. Not ensuring that nuclear weapons are not used in combat again is a global priority, and including by superpowers, right? Because China, it's prestigious to be a nuclear country. It grants you authority and capability and prestige that other countries do not have. You cannot, one thing that's noteworthy is if you have a nuclear weapon, you cannot have your regime threatened. Again, if someone was to attempt to march on Beijing and seize Beijing, even with a ground force, the CCP would use its nuclear arsenal to defend Beijing. It cannot happen. There is no scenario where that happens. And that is a very prestigious thing. And it's something that other countries are not afforded. And so what I want to talk about is the problem here. Because again, I see you guys in chat being like, the Saudis are good guys. Those guys who did 9/11, they were just rogue elements. Okay, well, that's not what the lawsuits say. And yeah, the 9/11 Commission report, which was released 22 years ago, 3 years after 9/11, quote, found no evidence that the Saudi government as an institution or senior Saudi officials individually funded al-Qaeda, which is actually a really bizarrely worded thing. First off, finding no evidence doesn't mean it didn't happen, right? Inside my windowless garage, there is no evidence that the sun exists. Yet, it's definitely there. And that the Saudi government as an institution, I don't know what that means. What do you mean the Saudi government as an institution? Why not just say the Saudi government or senior Saudi officials individually funded al-Qaeda? What a strange, convoluted, what a strange series of very specific claims. It's like, I'm trying to think of a good analogy here. It's like saying, listen, I have never taken cash with my hand out of grandma's wallet. You're like, you mean you never stole from grandma? And you go, right, I've never taken cash with my hand out of grandma's wallet. You see the problems here, right? So right there's something a little squishy here. But then 10 years later, the FBI said, actually, guys, a Saudi diplomat named Thumari and a Saudi Ministry of Islamic Affairs official and a radical cleric who lived in the United States named al-Bayoumi, those guys actually had helped the 9/11 hijackers a lot, pretty extensively. And in 2021, al-Bayoumi was actually outed as indeed being a Saudi intelligence agent. So in fact, 3 Saudi government officials actually assisted the hijackers in entering the United States. Then in 2022, the FBI said there's actually a 50-50 chance al-Bayoumi actually had advanced knowledge that 9/11 was to occur. Guys, at some point, if you go, listen, an agent of the Saudi intelligence knew that these guys were planning 9/11 and didn't do anything, at what point do you sit there and go, I think that the government of Saudi Arabia is just culpable. I mean, al-Bayoumi helped the hijackers find housing in San Diego. He stated he was just being a friend, right? But he also had said he wasn't a Saudi government agent, which that part was a lie. Now, the Saudi governments, of course, cannot be sued by the United States, conveniently. Our Congress has passed a law protecting the Saudi government. And a federal judge ruled that a lawsuit brought by the survivors of 9/11 said they actually had a reasonable basis to sue the Saudi government. So this whole section here, again, Bayoumi and Thumari, diplomatic employees, were employed by, they were diplomats at the Saudi General Consulate in Los Angeles. Right? It helped the hijackers find apartments. Al-Bayoumi actually paid the first 2 months' rent for the 2 men and helped them set up bank accounts. That's just what you do for a person you've just met. Subsequent FBI investigations revealed al-Bayoumi was in close contact with Saudi government agencies. The telephone numbers of employees of the Saudi embassy who worked in the Islamic Affairs office were actually found in Bayoumi's apartment, right? Very common. Obviously, I have a bunch of consulates of numbers for a bunch of foreign governments in they're just sitting right here on my desk, right? Don't we all? FBI investigations also, it turned out, that he made dozens of phone calls to the Saudi consulate in Los Angeles. Just another common thing, right? And Al-Thumari, suspected of providing behind-the-scenes support to the hijackers, a high-ranking Saudi embassy employee in Washington, allegedly tasked the two to support the FBI 9/11 perpetrators. And this is in a court filing. FBI said that a senior Saudi embassy employee instructed these two men to assist the 9/11 hijackers. But the Saudi government didn't have anything to do. Now, al-Bayoumi, the FBI knew all along, of course, that Bayoumi was a Saudi agent. U.S. police had confirmed internally that al-Bayoumi was indeed working for the Saudi Secret Service. I mean, this is just, it goes on and on and on, right? Connections to Saudi leadership arose through the Saudi ambassador to the United States, Bandar bin Sultan, who, of course, is related to MBS and the rest of the Saudi royal family. U.S. Congress File 17, something called File 17, listed over 36 names, including Thumari, Bayoumi, and others, identifying numerous personal links between Saudi Arabia and the 9/11 hijackers. Bandar himself came under scrutiny when it was known that at least $15,000 had been transferred directly from his personal bank account to the family of a Saudi in California. That Saudi, al-Bayoumi, who then sent that money to pay for the rent of the hijackers. I don't know what more evidence you want. I mean, they did everything but fly the planes. 10 days before the attack, Turki Ibn Faisal unexpectedly resigns at the head of the Saudi Secret Service, a position he had held since 1979, as is completely normal. And his resignation came as a surprise, as he had just months prior had his term of office extended another 4 years. And for example, in the phone book of Al-Qaeda member Abu Zubayah, arrested in March of 2012, contained the secret phone number of a company in Colorado there was a shell company that managed the Prince of Saudi Arabia's country estate, as well as the number of one of Bandar's employees, a bodyguard at the embassy. Weird stuff. Right? Also, of course, significant amounts of al-Qaeda funding was from private donors in the Middle East, particularly Saudi Arabia. Wealthy Saudi individuals, Islamic charities have provided a fertile ground for fundraising for al-Qaeda. Oftentimes, these donations were to charitable foundations with Saudi state involvement, of course, diverted into channels that ultimately benefited al-Qaeda, i.e. you donate to the Feed the Starving Afghan Children Fund. The Starving Afghan Children Fund goes and funds the organization for helping Afghans, and then it turns out that the organization for helping Afghans primarily helps, you guessed it, al-Qaeda, right? That's a theoretical example, but that's basically the scheme. They would call it the so-called golden chain, including mostly wealthy Saudis who supported bin Laden. So again, I think there's robust evidence here that the United States knew, and that Saudi Arabia and its government directly enabled the Saudi government to perpetrate 9/11. And again, if you're a family member of someone who was killed in 9/11, seeing this should disgust you. The president's kids likely doing a deal, funding the people who perpetrated 9/11, funding, again, them personally, the family. Remember, the Saudi government is the Saudi family. And all of this to make the Middle East a way more dangerous place, as if it wasn't already that. Exactly. GG, thanks for the 2. How's the Trump reflecting pool going? I don't know. It's closed off because it's a crime scene, right? Because of the terrible vandals, the president said, right? They're probably collecting evidence and stuff, you know? Really pulling it up? No, they're not. They pulled it up and they're going to repave it. Again, somehow it cost another $15 million no-bid contract. That's how this goes. But again, compared to Trump's kids getting billions of dollars to their companies gifted by Saudi Arabia, who is then going to clearly use it to build a nuclear weapon. They're not going to build a nuclear weapon. They're going to threaten to build a nuclear weapon with it, right? Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button, check out another video here, and of course, become a member at combatvetnews.com for access to an entire archive of premium videos, including combat footage that YouTube would never let me show you. The link is in the description. And of course, a huge thanks to all of the Combat Vet News members.